This is day 4 of recording myself to improve my speech. Last time I noticed I actually started speaking a lot of R's again. So I'll try to go back to speaking no filler words, no non-words, and get more comfortable with silence. Continuing on, we're reading the same two books again, The School of Life and The Psychology of Money. In the School of Life, we've moved on to a new subsection within relationships, and that's on arguments. Rather, dealing with problems, and within that we're talking about arguments. uh, to begin with, the author details how arguments aren't just about getting something right. There's more at stake when two people, especially two people who are close to each other, are arguing. There is within any argument implicit that a rejection of our case might mean more than we were just wrong about what we were saying. It might mean that we were not, our feelings were not accounted for, our opinions were not seen properly. And so, within every argument, implicitly in a relationship, is also uh, this implicit need to be heard. And it is precisely when this is ignored and the person feels that it is ignored that we get all these avoidant behaviors that manifest themselves in different ways in relationships. And that is why it is so common to observe argument, serious being defined as anything that you wouldn't expect to be part of the common discourse. And how to identify some of them and what could be common solutions to some of these arguments, that the author details by classifying arguments into certain types. Now, some of the types are covered in today's video in the part I've read, and two of them I've covered till date. The first one is the argument that keeps coming back over and over again. The case is made that this is happening because of a reason, and that reason is we are actually shying away from talking about the real problems. The real underlying problems are actually serious and severe. And so, by dancing around it and focusing on the hyper specific details of the current scenario, we try to ease our burden. We try not to come face to face with the fact that the person we are with might not be at all in tune with the movement of our souls, or they might not, we have invested so much energy into a person who now we see has such, not flaws really, but has such a characteristic that can ignore the movement of our inner working. And so what really needs to be done, rather than these ever recurring arguments about who will who will have the TV control, or the how one handles money, or any such common recurring argument, instead of these, what really needs to be addressed is usually much more serious. And instead of shying away from it, we probably need to address it, and that might actually result in someone walking away from a relationship. But maybe that is exactly what is needed to prevent future misery and not let it compound. And the second type of argument that we'll discuss today is the defensive argument. We've all probably observed this. When there's a difference, we all are flawed, and all probably know that in our bones. But we probably all also have had differing experiences on how receptive we've been to feedback of our flaws. There might have been times where we've been told our flaws and we've been really keen to listen, thinking that this is a great opportunity for improvement, and really trying to get the most out of that. And there might have been other times when we are again given feedback on our flaws, but instead of doing that, we actually turn defensive. We try to counter argument, we offer counter arguments, we try to offer rebuttals, and try to not see if there's a kernel of truth in the feedback that's coming our way. Now, when do people actually change? It's certainly not when, in a very cold manner, they're delivered with surgical accuracy, whatever their flaws are. It is when an empathetic environment is created and people are conveyed and invited to a change in themselves so that they can be better people. That is precisely when people who are actually always aware of their flaws will openly admit that, you know what, that's actually right, and they probably knew it in their heart of hearts, and they will commit to making a change that they themselves knew is long overdue. I myself have had similar experiences, uh, especially with respect to a senior. Their way of giving feedback came out of a place of love. However, their way of doing so always made me feel that an admission of my faults wouldn't be an invitation to become a better person and therefore be more loved, but rather leave me to a task of leave me to a lonely task of having to arduously change myself without any sympathy and without any care given to this attempt at self improvement. And so, even if our intentions of giving feedback are in the right place, we can end up doing it in such a way that the other person ends up feeling that they have to go through this arduous long task without any care or sympathy. And that just never or very rarely produces good results. The right way to go about it has to be to create a good empathetic environment in which people are invited to better themselves. Okay, moving on to the psychology of money. Today was, what was it? Let's see here. Chapter 7, Freedom. It talked about how time and being able to do whatever you want with your time is the biggest dividend money can give you. There's this common notion in the popular discourse that money and happiness have some kind of correlation. And happiness, the author makes the case, is complicated because it is pretty individual based. However, one common element we can extract out for most people is that the ability to be able to spend their time however they want, with whoever they want, and for however long they want, is something that aids in their happiness. In fact, the author does quote an actual psychologist who did this study in the 1980s called Angus Campbell, who promptly reported having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well being than any of the objective conditions of life we have considered. By the objective conditions of life, he's referring to other factors that we commonly associate with happiness, being geographical location, income, savings. Those had a weak correlation with happiness. If you were to keep others constant and vary those, happiness still had a wide variation so as to suggest a weak correlation. But if you controlled for other factors and changed and varied uh, time, free time you had, or time you had to spend in whichever fashion you want, that resulted in a stronger correlation. Now, the second half of the chapter moves into analyzing what's happening in the modern day. The example given is focused on North America, USA. It gives some statistics and adjust those statistics for inflation and compares it to whatever statistics we have in the modern day. The case is made that the median, not the average, the median American, after adjusting for inflation, is considerably richer than in the 1950s, and a number of other parameters that we could measure The modern day American is doing much better. But on any surveys of how stressed out they are, they also report being more stressed out than any of the 1950s surveys. And so this is quite the curious case. The author's argument is, well, earlier we had a strong dissociation between when we are working and when we are not working, because most of the work, like 90% or more of the work, was physical. We didn't think through the work, it was more labor related. So there's not much you can do about building a car when you're not on the assembly line. So when you were not at the assembly line, you were not working, you were free. But if you're into software or into making a marketing plan, your tool is your brain, and you can't leave behind your brain. So even if you're not working, your brain might still be in that mode while you're washing the dishes or eating dinner or waking up at 3 a.m. stressed out. And so even though we might technically be free, the feeling might exist that since our tool of operations is still with us, we're still in a working state. And so that being an analysis of what is happening right now is one point. And the second point is, if we are to use money in a way that aids happiness, the way to do it would be something like this. The practical advice would be something like this. Save up enough such that you can afford a few days off sick if you're sick without burning your whole economic balance down. If you can go one step further, save up enough for 6 months so that recession comes, you lose your job, you can still just afford to not have to run to the first job you have to find, first job you get. And furthermore, the more money you can get, the more options and the more time it can give you, and the more relaxed and at ease and further happy you possibly could be. Right. That's all for today. I'll see you next time.